Welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth and becoming the best version of yourself. Today we have a great episode. Really, I say that about every episode, but I am excited for every episode that we film because I just enjoy having these conversations with Cesar. I think they're important conversations to have, and I think they're conversations that we all should be having. So, yeah, before we get started, how are you doing, Cesar?
I'm doing okay, It's Christmas Day.
It is Christmas.
Yeah.
Christmas Day.
I'm all right, we're
at 4 p.m.
At 4 p.m. Yeah, it's afternoon. We're not doing this super early as normal, but we got to get this episode out, so.
Well, it's not just we have to get this episode out. It's that I wanted to, and I've just been tired. I had Thursday and Friday. No, I had Friday, and obviously I always have Saturday and Sunday off. But on Friday, I was feeling like so exhausted. And even today, I think Susan and I went to bed at like 7 last night. We got home and immediately went to bed and woke up this morning. I was like, I don't even remember falling asleep.
Yeah, me neither.
So, yeah, it's been an interesting couple days, and now we're filming this on Christmas, and some of you might be wondering, why are you guys not with family on Christmas? And I think the answer to that question kind of reflects the concept of the episode. And so I have my notes pulled up on my laptop here, and basically kind of want to talk about the concept of elephants in the room. You know how that saying where it's like, oh, no one talks about the elephant in the room. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, no one wants to talk about the elephant in the room is usually how it's brought up,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it before, yeah.
Yeah, and so I came across none other than a TikTok from this girl, and I found out she has a podcast titled Elephants in the Room, and I'm like, I absolutely love that. And I really started thinking about it, and this concept of elephant in the room can be brought up in a lot of different case scenarios and in a lot of different situations, like at work, at personal life. There's so many times where there can be an elephant in the room, and it kind of reminded me of the situation that we're in. And so today's episode, I want to talk about when you're the elephant in the room. When for instance, me or you or someone listening, you're the elephant, and no one wants to bring up that you're the elephant in the room. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I get what you're saying, yeah.
Do you have any thoughts so far?
So far, I kind of want to understand how you want to go about this subject, I guess, because I think there's a bunch of different ways that you can talk about that, I guess. Yeah, so I'm really curious to know, what do you, I guess, what is it that you want to take away from this conversation?
Well, I don't have a takeaway
Well, not takeaway yet, but what is it that you want to talk about and bring up?
So, first off, I want to start with the definition of elephant in the room, just in case anyone doesn't know it, because I know there's some sayings sometimes that aren't common in just different places. I'm constantly learning new sayings, so I'm let me just make sure we talk about what an elephant in the room is. So an elephant in the room is a major problem or controversial issue that is obviously present but avoided as a subject for discussion because it's more comfortable to do so. In the environment, people aren't talking about it because they feel like it would be awkward to bring it up, but it's also very awkward to not address it. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in one of those scenarios? Where everyone knows something, and it's in The Office when everyone knows Andy is getting cheated on with Angela, no one says anything. Yeah. That's the whole elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I thought was interesting first off with an elephant in the room, that it also reminds me of the saying of a black sheep. Mm-hmm. And the definition of black sheep is a member of a family or group who is regarded as a disgrace to it, or just outcast. And I think the two are kind of semi-related, and I think they also relate back to this conversation is going to sound like it's chaotic, but it kind of all strings together in my head, and it all kinds of relates to what happens when you are like different than other people, or like you have a different lifestyle or different needs or different wants, or even like, I think honestly the idea of like just setting boundaries for what you want in your life.
No, I can totally agree with that and that understanding, both those definitions and that in general too.
Yeah, and I think something that comes to mind is that I think for the past like year or so, like we've been that elephant or like the black sheep.
Yeah, I would say yeah.
Yeah, and
we me and you understand that, but I would say other people don't understand that, I guess. You know.
Yeah, and so like,
or they don't even agree with that, whatever the case is.
And I think specifically this happens like for instance what we're going through, and I won't go into like great detail of like why Caesar and I feel that way or why it is that way. But when I was thinking about this idea for the episode, I think this often happens when you're going through a period of change in your life and you're transforming into someone else. And I think it happens because people, especially those that you surround yourself with, like whether they be friends or family, they see you a certain way, you know, and like for most of like my life, you know, I've been a certain way, and I've never really pursued like growth as much as I have now. And like, I don't know if the same is for you, but I think when you're going through this period of change, because it's so unfamiliar to other people, even if that change, like, you know, is good, it comes off as kind of a bad thing to other people. You get what I'm going at?
Mm-hmm. I get what you're going with that.
Yeah. And I think this can lead to, well, something comes to mind. There's a couple of things that come to mind when I think about this, but when you're going through a period of your life where you're changing and you're finding out what you want for yourself and for your life, and you're focused on that, I think that the people who benefited from you being your old self are the ones who are most pressed about you changing into someone else.
Yeah, because they got used to seeing you in a certain light or way or whatever the case is, and then like them seeing you be different, I guess, from what their normal way, I guess, the normal way of them seeing you. It's like kind of like shocking, I guess.
Yeah, and like, you know, to them, like different may be wrong. Like, oh, you're changing in the wrong way, and you know, everyone has their opinion about it, and I think it also goes the other way, where if you were seen a certain way, like, you know, maybe you were seen in a like more negative light before, and you're trying to change into a better person, they're also never gonna see that change. They're always gonna think of you as what their perception of you is, you know, and
whether they tell you that or not too.
Yeah, and I think this also reminds me of something I used to hear a lot in retail, and it's one of the things that I think is commonly said, and it's something I disagree with. I don't disagree with the statement itself because I think it's true, but I think there's something wrong with it, and that is perception is reality. That's the way it is in this world. So someone's perception of you, or someone's perception of an event, or someone's perception of the world is the reality that they live in. So in retail, when this came up, this was because, like, I remember this being told to me. I can't remember exactly what case scenario, but it was like, oh, like, the way people perceive you is going to be the reality, even if it's not true. And it's like, it kind of was super disheartening for me. It's like, how am I supposed to go and try to change other people's perception of me if, like, it's all, like, it just kind of feels like a losing game at that point.
To change someone's opinion, which would say a lot to someone about how someone feels about someone's perception of somebody. It's gonna take them to see what they want to see. The same way that, you know, if you want to physically change yourself, whether it's like through activities like running or riding a bike, like you have to put that work in order for you to, you know, maybe a month or two down the line, you're like, oh, like, you know, whether you have some kind of quantifiable way to look at it and be like, damn, I'm different now, I feel better, or whatever the case is. The same way with somebody who wants you to be a certain way, you'd have to put in what they deem to be that work. What like, oh, I need you to show me X in order for me to see
And
that.
the thing is, that's what bothers me
Yeah.
is that it's not like you shouldn't have to live your life for other people in order to change someone's mind, about you. Like, oh, in order for me to think that you're X, you must do Y.
And all these
like,
other-
why
yeah.
would I have to, like, why should we have to? Then it feels like you're living your life for others people, for someone's validation, someone's like acceptance, and that just feels wrong. Like, if you have to fight for, like, especially people who should love you to love you, then, like, what does that say about them? It doesn't. I feel like a lot of times it says less about us than it does about other people.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. I think the only really ever valid point to ever say that to somebody, where it's like, I need you to do X, Y, or Z, is like, if it's something of like something extreme. I can't even think of what that extreme thing would be. Like, oh, like something that's really harming themselves. Like drugs and alcohol, right? Like if you saw somebody going down that rabbit hole and you really love them and you want to care for them, obviously, there's like those, what do you call it? Intervention. It reminds me of The Office when they wanted to do the intervention of Meredith on Christmas. It's funny on Christmas too.
On Christmas.
Yeah, and like, and then it was it not Dwight? It was HR guy. Toby, who's like, you can't do this. You can't do this.
Like, I'm doing your job.
Do your job. Yeah. So like something like that, and then she still didn't agree with it, And
I think though too, like, even in that situation, see, I feel like I can see both sides. I can see, like, where, like, if you love someone and they're struggling through those things, like, you obviously want to help them, but you're going to, like, give them essentially an ultimatum. Like, if you don't do this, if you don't change, like, I don't want to be around you. And, like, someone in a state of mind that might be dealing with something bigger than you could possibly imagine, those don't, like, people, like, do it as a way to be like, if they really care, they'll do this. But I don't think it necessarily correlates that way sometimes. I think sometimes a person can love you who's struggling, but just also not know, like, how to show it, and, like, also, like, maybe it's not the way to do it. So I think that there's also two sides of that. But I think that it's, like, it was one of the most annoying things when I worked in retail, where it's like, oh, someone's perception is the reality. And I'm like, well, why should I have to continuously change who I am in order to fit someone's reality in a better way? Or like, why do I have to fight to make them, to, like, show them exactly who I am when, like, I'm doing my best already, you know? And so it kind of, like, I think that's why it bothered me a lot when people said that, because I already felt like I was fighting this fight that I wasn't going to win, to show people I'm a good person, to show people, especially when I was at Target, to show people I'm a good leader and that I want the best and I want to be the best. And just because other people didn't see it didn't mean I wasn't, And I think that's what's, like, just because you can't see something doesn't make it not true.
Yeah, like, just because you don't see that person putting in the work and behind the scenes doesn't mean that they're not, because you're physically not with your own eyes seeing it. And that's one of the things too about this is like I won't see it until I believe it, type of thing.
No, I won't believe it until I see it.
I won't believe it until I see it. Yeah,
and I think that's also, like, that's been something, and I posted a video a while ago. It's probably, like, close to a year ago, where I think, especially with growth, a lot of it is invisible to, like, the naked eye or to other people. Only you know, like, what you've been doing for yourself. Just because you're not posting it for people on display doesn't mean it's not happening. But I think because we live with, like, social media and all these things, people are gonna make, again, their own perceptions of who you are. And, like, because you don't, like, share certain things, it must mean, like, they're not happening. And I think that's so, like, toxic as well, because, I mean, for me, it does create that, like, need for, like, external validation. I feel like I have to post my wins and I have to post, like, what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, like, even if I don't do that, doesn't mean I'm not working on myself, Even if, like, you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important, like, to consider. And I think a lot of people don't see it that way.
No, I would probably say a fair sure don't. I mean, I understand that you tend to try at least your best, from my understanding, of trying to see both, perspectives, I guess, right? Like trying to understand, and it's a hard thing to do, especially when if there's like let's say like there's a lot on the line or whatever the case is. Like some people just want possibly even just lie, like I guess you could say like lie their way into just like getting them to agree with you or whatever, like just to be like, oh no, I get it, but they really don't. It's like I see my fair share of that where it's like no, you don't, because if you did understand what I was saying or whatever the case was, you would probably be like, oh, or at least be honest and be like, you know what, I don't think I'm understanding this, and that's a lot better thing to say if you're like, you know what, I don't get where you're coming from, I don't understand what's going on, like than just saying, okay, I get it, but you don't.
Yeah, I think so too. Like with like considering like talking about like an elephant in the room, I think it's so funny like that it's something like in the definition it's something that's so easily like, what's it say? It says it's obviously present but no one addresses it, and I think that's such a bad is not even the word. It's so stupid that like we stray away from having those conversations just because they're uncomfortable. Like just because they're, I think everyone's thinking about the outcome and they know what the outcome might be.
No, or that, or they want the outcome to be a certain way.
Yeah, they want to like manipulate the outcome and they don't agree. And I think that's funny too. I've definitely seen like, especially more recently, people who, there's so many people in this world that just want to manipulate like situations and things and people and to be their way, what they see as right or wrong. And I think a lot of people also go into conversations, even say like they do want to talk about like said elephant in the room, they go into conversations not wanting to listen, not wanting to hear. They already have their argument prepared.
They have,
it's just going back and forth at someone who is never going to hear what they need to hear.
Yeah, they have that,
or believe what you tell them.
Oh yeah, they have that preconceived notion.
Yeah,
and they are only looking to position or move the conversation in a certain way.
Yeah,
and they'll bring up some of the randomest things to try to like get you to understand what they're talking about. But in reality, it's like if they just took a second to try to hear out the conversation, there would be a lot more. You would be able to get a lot more done. And I sense like, I don't know if that's the right way to say, like get a lot more done with that person in regards to like good conversation. Productive. Yeah, but we're like, oh, like you have a better understanding of where they're coming from versus just trying to. I can see why people do that, because again, there are people out there that all they do or want to do is manipulate anything they're ever put in, like in regards to like a position of power or like a role they have, whether it's at work, or whatever the case is. And for them, it's a lot easier to do that versus actually trying to find, oh, I was actually wrong here. And then like, you know what?
Well, I think a lot of people struggle with taking accountability.
That too.
Like for the actions, mm-hmm. Like to admit that I was wrong means, X, Y, or Z. And I think that's something where like an elephant in the room comes into play, is that it's honestly like everyone who like can acknowledge the elephant probably knows where it went wrong, but if it's going to reflect badly on someone, they don't want that someone to be them, and it's protecting like your own reputation and how people see you while like creating a narrative that's not true. And I think that's something that I've experienced recently, and and I think it's, when I think back to like the root of all problems, it's like about accountability and narratives like without facts. The first person to, like for instance, if I tell you something and like I tell you a story about something, and then my sister, let's just like my sister comes and tells you a story about the same thing but told differently. The one you're probably more gonna believe is mine because I told it to you first. Like mm-hmm. You may like, oh, like, well, Rihanna said this, but like Sunny told me this, and it's like you had that first story, and it's always gonna be in your mind. And like, so essentially, like by me getting to you first, I control the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, a part of it's that too. A part of it is also if, like, let's say I never don't know about, yeah, let's say I never knew you, I guess, right? But I met your sister first or whatever it was, like you having established some kind of like almost like put yourself as an authority figure of the conversation, or because it's the story that's being told is from their perspective and they were there and they were able to like kind of like tell you in a certain way why they were right in the beginning, and then someone else tells you and then you're like, oh, you know what, I don't even know what to believe. And the more
you tell the story, the more like it all becomes jumbled and everyone's like, oh, I don't know what happened, and it's and
then it's like, oh, like I mean, if it was me, like this is why like I'm sort of the person that like if that were to ever happen, or actually it has happened, I'm more of like, I honestly don't know the truth in regards to that because I wasn't there, and then you're hearing two different stories, and you're like, I can't like certainly agree with any of you guys. So like that's the smartest thing to do would be to be like, you know what, I don't know what's going on, but is there any path forward in this? Whether you guys are both right, like maybe you're right, maybe you're right. Like I don't know. You know, what does the path forward look like if you want one to be, I guess. If you don't, then it should be said, and then that's it. Like, what else is there to do? You know, what else can you do?
Yeah, I think too, like from this, something I had written down is like, I think in these situations, it's especially difficult when you're dealing with like family issues. And I think if you haven't recognized already by us being here filming a podcast on Christmas, we've got a little bit of family issues. And I think so it makes it really hard to figure out what do you do in that scenario. What do you do when you're an elephant in the room amongst family or amongst people that are supposed to care about you, amongst people that, you know, are supposed to be those like closest to you. And that's something I experienced recently, was just like this feeling like, I don't want this to be like make me look bad, but it's kind of truly how I feel. It's just like not having family because like of like being seen in a way that just isn't true of who I am, and you know, not being like understood.
Yeah.
And I think from that, from all these feelings, from everything, from all the issues that have occurred over like the past year or two, I've realized that like boundaries like are important. You know, boundaries need to be set in order to move forward. And I realized that again, like similar to what I brought up, is like the people who took advantage of you when you didn't have boundaries are gonna be more upset about you having the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it becomes evident like that, like once you set boundaries, who was benefiting from you not having any. And I think it's interesting to see the reactions of people when you set those boundaries, you know?
No, it is. It's either seeing their reaction when you're trying to set boundaries or like them just not really understanding the boundaries in the first place. You know, and understanding that like, hey, there needs to be some space to even for them to even try to understand what's going on, and then they don't want to understand either too.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting when you set boundaries, because I think often people see you as being like selfish. You know, I think when I first started like really focusing on myself and my growth and like the person I wanted to be, it came off as like selfish, you know, only worried about myself. And it's like, I've spent my entire life, what I feel like, living for other people and not doing what really made me happy and only doing what other people wanted me to do. And I think it's about time that I deserve to, you know, to be selfish, but I also don't think it's selfish to set boundaries no matter who they're with, whether it's with friends or family. But I think it gets a little bit stickier when it is with family, because there's that whole concept where like family's family. I'm like, it's not that I don't believe that either. It's that I think if family's family, people deserve a certain level of like not just respect, but to be shown that they're loved and cared for. And like, if you can't do that, then why do you deserve a place in my life? Like, why should I shed any more tears for you? And I think that's where I got in my life, where I had such a hard time for a long time of just feeling like, not just that I was an elephant in the room, but I was like an outcast. I was a black sheep, and I couldn't mold myself to be the person that other people wanted to be and wanted me to be. And then even more so, even if I did, I wouldn't be happy. I'd be doing what other people wanted me to do and not what I want to do. And I thought to myself, at what point do I get to do what's best for me? At what point do I get to be happy and, not feel like no matter what I do, like I've told you before, I feel like I've been playing a losing game, because I can't have both the things I want. I can't have a loving family and a clear, like, good mental health, essentially, because like the letting certain people in my life affects my mental health negatively, because I'm not treated well, you know, and like I think everyone deserves to be around people that genuinely care about them.
I think most people can agree to that and be like, if there's something going on in their lives and they recognize, like, whether it's a person or even a thing, it could even be physical things, like that's causing pain, whatever it is, that they remove that from them. Either they remove themselves from that in order to like find a solution, or nothing will ever, or no one can really move forward, if no one really is trying to truly understand what's going on. And then I feel like if that understanding is actually tried, then maybe like that revelation, I guess you can say, or that like eye-opening moment of like, so that's what this was about, or that's what,
I think
like that might,
and I think everyone prays and hopes for an eye-opening moment, but I got to a point in my life where I wasn't going to wait for that eye-opening moment, because it doesn't feel like it's coming. And how long can you sit and wait for people to realize and understand where you were coming from, who you are? And, you can't just beg people to love you or to care for you or to even treat you like well, like everyone hopes for that eye-opening day, but sometimes that day is not coming. Sometimes the best thing you can do is realize that it might not come, and that you need to do what's best for you.
Yeah,
and you can't sit here waiting for someone to understand or like have an epiphany of where everything went wrong, and oftentimes once they do, it's too late. It's that, like, those, I don't want to say the bridges are burned, but they're pretty tainted, they're pretty, they're there, but not really there. And I think that's something that I struggled with, especially when we talk about growth. I think this is a part of growth, is understanding who you need in your life and who's gonna, support you in your journey and who's gonna hold you back. And it took a long time for me to realize, well, I don't think it took a long time for me to realize what I needed, but it took a long time to realize that it was okay to do what I needed. Because, like, I don't want to like air out like all like dirty laundry, but like there's a lot of issues in my family, and there were some that I came knowing that we had, but I held on to hope for a long time that the things I knew weren't true.
Or you hope to, I think, in a sense of like, maybe, let me know if I'm wrong, that you hope that they would be like resolved, or there's hope for all that.
Yeah, that there's hope for all that, or like, or that people would change. And I do think people can change, but again, it comes from wanting to change and wanting to be a better person. And why would you change if you don't think there's anything wrong with you? And if you can't look inside and see, hey, this is like where I've gone wrong, then you can't change people. People change themselves. And I think for a long time, I think that's where a lot of like even relationships go wrong, is like you think that you can change another person. You can't. They have to want to change. And I think with family, it's super painful because like you don't choose your family, you know? And for me, I always wanted to like feel like I had a really great big like family, and you know, we'd all sing kumbaya whatever, but it's that doesn't always work out that way, and that was the hardest thing for me to grasp. It still is. Like I still like I mean, we're sitting here on Christmas, and I think that that was the hardest like realization for me, is like this is how things played out, you know? And like, but I think to myself too, is like, would it be any better if they didn't play out this way?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's just different.
Yeah, no, it is different. Yeah, I mean, I hope that this conversation can, I don't know, to those of you that are listening, maybe might understand a little bit of what's going on. Maybe you have that same sort of family in your life. But yeah, no, it's that's why I said, like, when you told me like how are you feeling, I'm like, I'm feeling okay. You know, it's not the best, but not the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I
guess.
think too, and I think you take it like,
I take things differently too.
yeah, I think me and Caesar are very different in how things affect us, and like, I'm very like emotional, and I'm very like, I don't know, like, I'll get hurt by a lot of things, and I think because I've been like burned so many times, it's like I no longer trust people that have burned me to not do it again. And that's like, what evidence do I have to say that you won't do this to me again? Therefore, I can't have that in my life. And like the way that's perceived has like also like made people think, I don't know, that I'm some god awful person, or that I'm crazy, or like, you know, my favorite, that like I'm changing Caesar, I'm the reason. And it's funny to me, like I say funny, like not as in like funny, but you know, having conversations with my parents where like they understand like what's happened without me even telling them what's happened, and like how like it's me, I'm the problem, like. And I was telling Caesar the reason that hurts me so much, because like we're both going through the same thing, but it's like, as someone who is so focused on trying to be a good person and trying to grow, and like, but everyone pointing fingers at me being the problem, like versus you, you know, versus you being the problem, it's me, I'm the problem, and you know, I'm crazy. I'm like, the people saying these things are like, are people that don't know me, that have never taken the time to get to know me. I think, have lack of empathy and lack of understanding of just everything. And, you know, I would never, ever, ever, ever want someone to feel the way that I felt in the past year. And, like, my darkest moments, like, some of my, like, it's kind of sad for Christmas, but, like, some of my darkest moments happened this year, and, like, I wouldn't wish them on my like worst enemy, because you know it's a pain that I never thought I'd feel.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then I mean, I think the only thing that got me through it was that I had you. Like I had at least one person by my side, or like my friends that were obviously like don't live here, but like I had my friends to talk to. But it still hurts, like, you know, even if you know, I think even when you're doing the right thing, sometimes it hurts. Mm-hmm. And you're doing what's best for you. And I think that's where people, when you're trying to grow, that's where people really struggle, is this point where you know what your path forward is, and you know that the path forward also is going to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah.
And it's like, some people might stop because they're like, I don't want to ruffle any feathers.
They would say most people don't want to ruffle feathers. That's the thing. Like, most people just want like things for better, you know, or they were okay before, you know, so like we don't have to ruffle feathers or whatever the case is, you know. And
I think it's ignorant though to ignore the issues. Like for the sake of not making anyone upset, or for the sake of like, then you just have these unresolved issues that eventually are going to come back up. Nothing, if you don't resolve something, it's automatically going to come back up. Somehow, some way. And I think that's exactly what's happening right now, is just the past coming back up because no one resolved it and no one wanted to resolve it. And here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are because we had unresolved issues and no one wants to communicate in a way that's effective. And it's like, I'll say for me too, like at this point, and maybe like, I'm obviously not a perfect person and I still have some growing. Like this whole podcast is not just like obviously to have these open conversations, but also like I feel like this will document like kind of our journey too of how we've grown. But I don't feel like there's a solution to certain things. I don't think they have to go unresolved, but I think, well, I won't say there isn't a solution. There is a solution, but the solution isn't favorable to other people, and therefore like the solution is boundaries, and boundaries aren't being respected. And that's the thing. It's like no one will accept that like this is the way it needs to be, and like, you know, that's the way it is. And I think that's just really
Like these boundaries, yeah, it's a crucial thing. I think if you ask most people have boundaries, and to some certain extent,
but some certain
you know,
extent, but like
yeah,
I don't think like as like
they understand, like, you know, like you just don't barge into someone's home, you know, like.
But that's different. Like obviously that's like a physical boundary, like you know.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about like these
It's also like, you
more
know,
important like boundaries, I'd say.
No, I mean also there's also like things that can affect you emotionally. Like the second you bring something up, you know, it's like, oh, you know, when you cross their boundary in that line because they get emotional or mad or angry about something you may have brought up, and there's like a boundary there. They just, either whether they recognize it or not, you know, like what, especially like when people say hurtful things, they're like, hey, you shouldn't say that. Like you clearly cross the boundary, you know, whether it's recognized or not. It's like if it's rude. But I think
boundaries are often things that people are aware of and they intentionally do.
Or that things too, yeah. There's people that intentionally like, oh, let me just, you know, like do this anyways or whatever. You know, just let me just yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess where do we go from here? You know?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question. You know, we're the elephant in the room. Yes, it's us.
It's us. We're the elephant.
So now what? That's like the ultimate question out of this. That I actually out of this whole podcast, maybe this whole year. You know, because I mean I feel like we've talked about this a lot, and yeah, I honestly don't know.
I think for me, like, you know, when you think like now what. There are a couple options, and I've done all of them. And some, like, the first is, like, you know, dwell and cry about it, and
yeah, you can sit in a corner and just sit in the fetal position for so long,
and
you know,
and just be upset and be angry and be mad and be all these emotions. And I've done that. I've been that person who, like, I didn't talk to anyone. I distanced myself from everyone, and I you know, I didn't want to even think about it because it just hurt so much. And then, you know, you get up. I don't think it's like a 360, but then there also came a day where I was like, I've got to heal. You know, I've got to try to figure out what does healing look like. And I think that's one of the options. Like, okay, how do I heal from this? And how do you move your life forward? You know, how do you what's the next best step for you? And I think that's where it starts to seem like you're being selfish, because you're focused on you and you're focused on what is going to be best for you and like your, not just your physical health, but your mental health, something that has like deteriorated. Like I've constantly had to rebuild over this year, like my mental health and the idea that I'm good enough and that I deserve a place in this world, I deserve a voice in this world. And just because some people see me a certain way, that doesn't mean it's true, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's not my job to change people's perception of me. And I think that's your step forward, is coming to understand that this world will be full of people that maybe don't like you. This will be those people might be even the ones that are closest to you or are supposed to be closest to you. And that's okay. And that was something I couldn't swallow. Like, one of the biggest pills to swallow was that I would be someone that people didn't like. But more so, I knew that people wouldn't like me, but more so people that I thought should love me. Because their family wouldn't like me. And that was a really, I've spent hours crying to you about it. I've spent hours crying to, like, my dad about it, my mom about it, like, everyone. And, like, it was, you know, it's hard, but I think when you just gotta continue to take the next best steps. I don't think when you're in these kind of situations, like, when you're kind of in the situation too where, like, you feel alone in crowded rooms, or, like, where you just, I think, for me, it's all amounted, like, feeling like I don't have a home anywhere. You know, like, I'm just living without a place to call home. And I think that, yeah, you just take the next best step and you work on you, because the only thing you can control is really the steps, like, the actions you take, you know? Like, that's what you can do. And so just focus on that. And, you know, that's kind of like my goals for like the new year is to really be honed in on, like, healing, but also, like, focused on, like, everything I want to accomplish. And, like, obviously with you and me, obviously I'm not just so selfish to where I wouldn't focus on things you want to accomplish too, because I love you and I want to help you. But I think we all deserve to be a little selfish when it comes to growth. You know?
Especially when it's things that are going to drive us forward into, whether it's our career, our own family, like, things that are crucial towards, like, the longevity. Like, I'm talking about, like, 5 or 10 years from now, you know, not like short-sighted, like, what's a month from now, like, things. And I think people have the right to do that, whether it's them, you know, doing whatever they want to do because they have their own specific nuanced arguments for it, or whether they want to actually help in that healing, you know.
Yeah.
But it's really up to us at the end of the day, like you said, like, it's us. So we're the ones that have to drive forward and on that path, and how that path looks like is up to us too.
Yeah.
And what that means, you know.
I do think, like, despite everything that's been so chaotic this year, I think that this upcoming year, 2023, will be full of healing, full of, like, Caesar and I have been saying it for a couple months, like, we're on the brink of greatness. We're on the brink of really great things. And I think that's also why I get so hurt when things get brought back up, because I'm like, I just want to focus on, like, what we're doing, you know? And, like, yeah, I just want to focus on what we're doing well and what we can continue to do well. And, you know, Caesar and I have vision for our life, and I'm just invested in making that vision, like, a reality. And I don't think others should have as much of a say in it as they currently do, you know?
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
But this hasn't been a very Merry Christmas episode, but I think it's important to have these conversations. And if you feel like, you know, you're an elephant in the room, or that, you know, you're just an outcast or a black sheep, like, I've been there. And I would love to say you won't feel like that forever, but I'm still working through those feelings too. And I think that I think other people have experienced this. I mean, I saw TikToks where people kind of describe the same thing, and I think it's all how you move forward. We just have to move forward, you know, and move forward. And I think the other thing too is that I think the heart will always be there, but it's, like, a little lighter every day, you know? Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We're really excited. This will be the last episode of 2023.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is crazy, but
Wait,
we're
2022. You said 2023.
Oh, 2020.
I was
This
like,
will be
dang.
the last episode of 2022, and yeah, we're excited for everything that happened this year. You know, we started this podcast this year, and we never thought that, like, this would be something. Well, I knew that we would stick to it, but we got 100 subscribers.
Yeah, we hit
so
100.
It's small, but we're mighty, and we're gonna continue growing. And we hope that you continue to grow with us. Share your personal journeys with us. Share your stories, and, you know, I think we'll get a lot of cool guests on this year. definitely going to work on my outreach to people who can not just give Caesar and I a new perspective, but give you guys a new perspective. So this has been Growing Together with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We hope to see you again next week.
See you guys later.